The spaceship Frontier's Edge moved slowly through the dead star system. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge looking at the screens that showed 3 destroyed planets. Something terrible had happened here a long time ago. The planets had no air left and their surfaces were covered with marks from ancient weapons. Jake was a tall man with short brown hair and tired eyes. He had been exploring space for 15 years, but he had never seen destruction like this. The Galactic Council had sent his team to investigate after their machines detected signs of an old civilization. What they found was worse than anyone expected. "Captain, I'm getting readings from the 4th moon," said Lieutenant Amy Phillips. She was young, only 25, with red hair tied back in a ponytail. Her fingers moved quickly over her console. "There are buildings down there. They're still standing after all this time." Jake walked over to her station and looked at the data. The structures were massive, like giant towers reaching up from the moon's surface. They were made of black stone that seemed to swallow light. Around them were symbols and markings carved deep into the rock. "Take us down," Jake ordered. "Let's see what's left." The ship descended through the thin atmosphere. As they got closer, everyone on the bridge could see the structures more clearly. They were arranged in a circle around a huge doorway that led into the ground. The doorway was open, like a mouth waiting to swallow them. Lieutenant Chris Baker, the team's language expert, was already working on translating the symbols. He was a thin man with glasses who always looked worried about something. Right now he had good reason to worry, though he didn't know it yet. "The computer is having trouble with this language," Chris said, frowning at his screen. "It's very old and the grammar is strange. But I'm getting some words and phrases. What does it say?" Jake asked. Chris read from his screen. "I'm seeing things like ultimate challenge awaits and test of champions and glory to those who succeed. There's also something about eternal fame, but the context is unclear." Sergeant Nina Cole laughed. She was the ship's security chief, a muscular woman with short black hair and a scar on her left cheek from a previous mission. "Sounds like some kind of competition. Maybe ancient warriors came here to prove themselves." Jake studied the entrance through the view screen. Something about this place made him uncomfortable, but he couldn't explain why. The council needed information, and his job was to get it for them. "Get the away team ready," he said. "We're going inside." What none of them knew was that their translator was completely wrong. The ancient aliens who built this place had used a special way of writing. When they wanted to warn someone, they phrased it as a question about the reader's intelligence. "Only a fool would enter" didn't mean they were calling someone a fool. It meant that entering would make you a fool, but the computer didn't understand this. It thought the aliens were challenging future visitors. Every warning became an invitation. Every plea to turn back became an encouragement to continue. The translation was backwards in the worst possible way. 6 people suited up for the mission. Jake led the team along with Chris, Nina, and 3 others: Engineer Pete Harris, Medical Officer Dr. Linda Shaw, and Specialist Kyle Reed. Pete was good with machines and always carried extra tools. Linda was calm and professional, even in dangerous situations. Kyle was young and eager, maybe too eager. They took a small transport down to the surface and walked toward the entrance. The black stone was smooth under their boots. The symbols carved into it seemed to move in their helmet lights, though that was probably just a trick of the shadows. "I'm getting more translations," Chris said as they walked. "This says, 'Prove your might,' and this part says only the worthy may proceed. It's definitely some kind of challenge or test." Nina checked her weapons. "Good. I like tests." They entered the doorway and found themselves in a corridor so wide that 20 people could walk side by side. The walls were covered with more symbols, all telling the same story according to the translator. This was a place where ancient heroes came to prove themselves. The real message was very different. It said, "We died here. We all died trying. This is not a test. This is a trap. It killed us and it will kill you. Please turn back. Please learn from our mistake." But Jake and his team saw only encouragement. They walked deeper into the structure. The corridor opened into a massive chamber. Their lights couldn't reach the ceiling or the far walls. In the center of the room was a platform, and on that platform sat something that made everyone stop and stare. It was a perfect sphere, about 2 meters wide. Energy crackled around it in patterns of blue and purple. The air around it seemed to shimmer and bend. "I'm reading exotic matter signatures," Pete said, his scanner beeping rapidly. "This technology is incredibly advanced, more advanced than anything we've seen from any current civilization. Linda moved her medical scanner around the room. I'm detecting organic residue. Lots of it, different species too. They came from all over the galaxy. She meant it as a warning, but no one was listening. They were all staring at the sphere. More symbols covered the walls of this chamber. Chris's translator worked on them while the others examined the sphere from a safe distance. This is interesting, Chris said. It says contain the star and prove yourself worthy and claim your victory. I think whoever built this place wanted people to somehow move or control that sphere. It was probably the final test. What it really said was, the star contains it. Do not break the seal. We sacrificed our worlds to create this prison. Do not free it. Please, we are begging you across time itself, do not touch the sphere. Jake made a decision that would change everything. Pete, can you analyze that containment field? I want to know if it's possible to transport that sphere back to the ship for study. Pete nodded and approached the platform carefully. His engineering background told him this was sophisticated technology. His scanner showed him the energy patterns and field harmonics. After 20 minutes of work, he thought he understood it. I can do it, Pete announced. I can transfer the sphere to our portable containment unit. The frequency match is tricky, but I can make it work. Do it, Jake ordered. Pete set up the equipment and began the transfer sequence. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the sphere hummed, rose into the air, and floated gently into their containment unit. It worked, Pete said, amazed. We actually solved an ancient alien puzzle. The team barely made it back to their transport ship. Behind them, the ancient structure was tearing itself apart. They launched into space just as the entire moon began to break into pieces. From the bridge of the frontier's edge, they watched in shock as massive explosions ripped across the surface. What did we do? Linda asked, her voice quiet with horror. Jake didn't have an answer. The sphere sat in their containment unit, perfectly stable and harmless looking. But something had gone very wrong down there. Chris was working frantically at his station, running new analysis on the alien text. His face had gone pale and his hands were shaking slightly. Captain, Chris said slowly, I'm getting different translations now. The computer is finding alternative meanings for some of those symbols. Like what? Jake asked. Well, that phrase about ultimate challenge could also mean ultimate danger, and test of champions might actually be death of champions. The grammar structure is really unusual. I think I need more time to get accurate translations. Nina watched the moon continue to break apart through the viewport. Whatever those symbols said, I don't think we were supposed to take that sphere, but it was too late now. The sphere was aboard their ship, contained and stable. Jake made the decision to return to the nearest council station and report their findings. Maybe the experts there could figure out what they had really found. The journey back took 3 days. During that time, strange things started happening across the sector. Ships reported unusual sensor readings. A mining station on the edge of the system stopped responding to communications. An automated cargo vessel was found drifting with no crew aboard. Nobody connected these events to the sphere yet. Space was dangerous and ships went missing sometimes. It happened. When the Frontier's Edge docked at Olympus Station, they were met by a team of scientists and council officials. News of their discovery had already spread. An ancient alien artifact with technology beyond anything currently known was big news. Dr. Alan Foster was the head of the science team. He was an older man with gray hair and excitement in his eyes. He had spent his whole life studying dead civilizations, and now he had a real artifact to examine. This is incredible, Alan said, looking at the sphere through the containment field. The energy readings are stable. The exotic matter is perfectly controlled. Whoever built this had technology we can only dream about. Pete Harris had stayed with the sphere during the trip, taking constant readings. He had noticed something that bothered him. Dr. Foster, can I show you something? Pete asked. They moved to a computer terminal and Pete brought up his analysis. The containment field isn't just holding the energy in. Look at these patterns. It's also blocking certain frequencies, very specific frequencies that we don't normally shield against. What kind of frequencies? Alan asked. I don't know exactly, but the field is designed to prevent something from getting out or possibly to prevent something else from detecting it. Alan considered this. Interesting. Maybe the sphere was valuable, and they didn't want anyone finding it. That would explain why it was hidden in such a remote location. But Pete wasn't convinced. The more he studied the containment field, the more it looked like a prison instead of a safe. There was a difference between hiding something precious and locking something dangerous away. While the scientists worked, Chris Baker was still analyzing the alien text. He had received all the recordings from the moon before it was destroyed. Now he was comparing the language structure to other ancient alien languages in the database. He found something disturbing. 3 other civilizations had used similar grammar patterns. All 3 were extinct. All 3 had left behind warnings about something they called the hunger or the devourer, or the end of light. Chris took his findings to Jake immediately. "Captain, I think we made a serious mistake," Chris said. He showed Jake the comparison data. These civilizations all left warnings, not challenges. They were trying to tell future races to stay away from something. Jake felt cold fear settle in his stomach. "You're saying that place wasn't a test site. I'm saying it was a warning site. And we ignored the warning because our translator got it backwards." Before Jake could respond, alarms started blaring throughout the station. They ran to the command center where Admiral Beth Crawford was coordinating emergency responses. "What's happening?" Jake asked. Beth looked grim. "Kepler station just went silent. They were transmitting normally, then nothing. We sent a probe. The station is still there, all lights on, all systems working. But there's nobody aboard. 3,000 people just vanished." "Vanished how?" Nina asked. "That's what we need to find out. Captain Morrison, since your ship is already prepped, I want you to investigate. Take Dr. Foster and his team. Maybe this is related to your discovery." Jake wanted to refuse. Every instinct told him that yes, this was definitely related to the sphere. But he couldn't prove it yet, and the council needed answers. The Frontier's Edge reached Kepler Station 6 hours later. They approached carefully, scanning for any threats. The station looked completely normal from the outside. Lights glowed in the windows. The reactor was running. Communication arrays were active, but when they docked and entered, they found corridors that were empty and silent. Personal items were scattered around. Food was still sitting on plates in the cafeteria. It was like everyone had simply vanished in the middle of their daily routines. "This is wrong," Linda said, scanning the walls with her medical equipment. "I'm detecting a residue coating everything. It's the same substance we found on that moon." The substance was black and seemed to absorb light. It coated the walls in thin layers, forming patterns that looked almost deliberate. Chris recognized one of the patterns immediately. That's the same symbol from the alien site. The one the translator said meant glory. He pulled out his portable analyzer and ran the symbol through his new translation protocols. The answer made him feel sick. "It doesn't mean glory," Chris said quietly. "It means consumed." They searched the entire station but found no survivors. Every single person was gone. The only evidence they had left behind was this strange black residue and the growing certainty that they had unleashed something terrible. On Olympus Station, Dr. Foster was working late in his lab. The sphere had been fascinating him for days. He barely slept, too excited by all the data he was collecting. Then at 2 a.m. station time, something changed. The sphere pulsed with light, once, twice, a third time. The pattern was regular, like a heartbeat or a signal. Foster called his assistant, Dr. Lisa Grant. Together they watched as the sphere's energy output increased by 3%. It was still perfectly contained, but something was different. "It's never done this before," Lisa said, checking the readings. "What changed?" Foster didn't know. But deep in space, in the darkness between stars, something ancient had noticed the pulse. It had been sleeping for millions of years, waiting. Now the prison that held it was active again. The seal had been disturbed. It began to move slowly at first, then faster. It was hungry after such a long sleep. The signal told it where to find food. Back on Kepler Station, Jake made a decision. "We need to get back to Olympus now. Something is responding to that sphere. We need to shut it down before anyone else disappears." But as they prepared to leave, their sensors detected something. Multiple. News about the ancient sphere spread across human space faster than anyone expected. Captain Jake Morrison and his crew became famous overnight. People called them heroes who had solved a mystery millions of years old. The council moved the sphere to their most secure research facility on Olympus Station, and scientists from 20 different species came to study it. Dr. Alan Foster stood before the full Galactic Council, presenting his findings. The chamber was huge, with representatives from 40 different alien civilizations. Some looked like humans, some looked like insects, and some looked like nothing found in nature. "Based on our translation of the site, this was clearly an ancient test," Alan explained. He showed holographic images of the symbols they had found. The inscriptions talk about glory, achievement, and proving worth. We believe the civilization that built it was challenging future races to show their technology was good enough. Ambassador Krell, who represented the Vaxen Collective, made a clicking sound with his mandibles. He looked like a giant praying mantis standing 8 feet tall. His species had explored space for thousands of years, much longer than humans. With respect, Dr. Foster, Krell said carefully. Has anyone checked these translations properly? The Vaxen have found similar sites before. They were always warnings, never challenges. Alan smiled confidently. Our universal translator is the most advanced in known space. It has successfully translated over 10,000 different languages. I believe we can trust what it tells us. Several other alien representatives looked uncertain, but nobody argued further. Humans were new to the galactic community, but their technology was impressive. If their translator said it was a challenge, then perhaps it was a challenge. What nobody knew was that the translator had a serious flaw. When dealing with dead languages that used special grammar rules, it made mistakes. The ancient aliens had written their warnings in a way that tested the reader's wisdom. They phrased everything as questions. Would a wise being proceed? Meant you should not proceed. But the translator thought they were encouraging people to prove they were wise by proceeding. Meanwhile, at the research facility, engineer Pete Harris continued studying the sphere with Dr. Lisa Grant. Lisa was a quantum physicist, one of the best in human space. She was fascinated by the energy readings. If we could copy this technology, we could power entire planets, Lisa said excitedly. The energy output is stable and incredibly dense. This little sphere produces more power than our biggest reactors. Pete nodded, but something still bothered him. Look at the containment field structure, though. See how it's layered? The outer layers are normal containment, keeping the energy from escaping. But the inner layers are different. They're dampening fields designed to suppress something. Suppress what? It's just energy. I don't think it is just energy, Pete said slowly. I think something is alive in there. Not alive like us, but conscious somehow. And the field is keeping it asleep or keeping it from calling out. Lisa laughed. Now you're being paranoid. It's an advanced power source, nothing more. But Pete couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important. On the frontier's edge, Chris Baker worked 18 hours a day on the translations. He had all the recordings from the moon plus images of symbols they had photographed. The more he studied them, the more wrong they seemed. He called Nina Cole to his workstation. Look at this symbol, he said, pointing to his screen. The translator says it means victory. But when I compare it to other ancient languages with similar structures, it could also mean survival, or even escape. Nina leaned closer. So which is it? That's the problem. Context matters. And this phrase here about those who came before could mean worthy ancestors, or it could mean previous victims. The grammar allows for both meanings. Previous victim sounds a lot worse than worthy ancestors. Exactly. I think we need to check everything again before we celebrate too much. Chris sent his concerns to the council, but nobody paid much attention. The sphere was contained, the technology was being studied safely, and humanity had achieved something remarkable. Why worry about translation uncertainties? Around the edges of explored space, strange things continued happening. An asteroid mining operation stopped responding. A passenger liner reported all its crew had nightmares about darkness that consumed light. A research station studying a nebula found strange black residue on their hull. But space was vast, and these incidents seemed random. Nobody connected them to each other or to the sphere sitting in its containment field on Olympus Station. Dr. Foster was thrilled with his work. Every day brought new discoveries about the sphere's technology. He had written 3 papers already and was planning a 4th. His career was made, but one night while working late, he decided to review the original symbol translations again. He used Chris Baker's new analysis protocols just to be thorough. The first symbol came back different. Instead of "prove your might," the new translation said, "Our might was not enough." Alan frowned and tried another. "Contain the star" became, "The star contains it." His hands started shaking as he ran every single symbol through the new analysis. The message that emerged was completely different from what he had been telling the council. "This place holds great death. We sacrificed our worlds to trap it here. Do not open this seal. Do not wake the consumer of light. Learn from our extinction. Turn back. Turn back while you still can." Alan sat in silence for a long time, staring at the corrected translations. They had not found an ancient test. They had found a prison, and they had opened it. He reached for his communicator to call an emergency meeting, but before he could, the sphere did something new. It pulsed with bright light, 3 times in quick succession. The pattern was regular, repeating every 10 seconds. The energy reading spiked by 5%. Alan's blood went cold. It wasn't just glowing. It was sending a signal. In the research bay, alarms started blaring. Lisa ran to the monitors and saw what was happening. The dampening fields that Pete had worried about were weakening, not failing, but definitely getting weaker. "What's it doing?" she asked. Pete checked his instruments. "It's broadcasting. On frequencies we can barely detect. But something out there must be able to hear it just fine." On the frontier's edge, Jake received an urgent message from Olympus Station. Admiral Beth Crawford's face appeared on his screen, looking worried. "Captain Morrison, we have a problem. The sphere has become active. It's sending out some kind of signal and we're detecting responses." "Responses from what?" Jake asked. "That's what concerns us. Long-range sensors show multiple contacts in deep space. They're moving toward us fast." "How fast?" Beth looked at something off-screen. "They'll reach Olympus Station in about 3 hours. Maybe less." Jake felt sick. "Admiral, we need to shut that sphere down. Whatever's coming, the sphere is calling it." "We're trying," Beth said. "But the containment field is integrated with the sphere's function. We can't shut it down without destabilizing the exotic matter. That could cause an explosion." Chris had been listening to the conversation. "Captain, I've completed my translation analysis. Those weren't challenges we found. They were warnings. The ancient civilization was trying to tell us about something they called the Devourer. They sacrificed their entire species to trap it. And we just freed it." Nina checked her weapons, her face set in hard lines. "Then we need to prepare for a fight." Jake looked at his crew. They were scared, but they were ready. Humans had made this mistake, and humans would have to fix it. "Set course for Olympus Station," Jake ordered. "Contact every ship in the sector. Tell them we need everyone who can fight, and tell them what's coming." Through the view screen, stars began to shimmer and distort. Space itself was bending as something massive pushed through from somewhere else. The contacts on sensors were getting clearer now. 3 enormous entities, each one bigger than a moon, tearing through reality toward the station where thousands of people lived and worked. The sphere pulsed again, faster now. It was excited. It knew its masters were coming. Jake opened a channel to the station. "Dr. Foster, I need you to find a way to shut that sphere down. I don't care how dangerous it is. If we don't stop the signal, we're all dead." Alan Foster looked at the sphere, then at the corrected translations on his screen. He had been so confident in the original interpretation. So sure. The council chamber was in chaos. 40 different species were shouting, clicking, whistling, and making whatever sounds they used to express fear and anger. The translator system struggled to keep up with everyone talking at once. "The humans have killed us all," someone screamed. "We must evacuate the core worlds immediately." Another voice demanded, "This is what happens when primitive species play with ancient technology." Ambassador Krell stood at his position, his mandibles clicking so fast they sounded like rattling bones. His species had survived for thousands of years by being careful and listening to warnings. Now a younger species had ignored every warning sign and awakened something terrible. Only one human in the chamber remained calm. Admiral Beth Crawford stood at her station, watching the tactical display that showed 3 massive contacts approaching Olympus Station. She was 60 years old with gray hair and the steady hands of someone who had fought in many battles. "Everyone stop yelling," Beth said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the noise like a knife. "Screaming will not save us. We have 3 hours, maybe less. We need to use that time wisely." "Use it how?" Krell demanded. "Those things destroyed a civilization so advanced we are still finding their technology. What makes you think we can fight them?" Beth smiled, and it was not a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who had made a terrible mistake and was ready to fix it no matter the cost. "Because we have something that ancient civilization did not have," Beth said. "We have humans who are very angry at themselves, and angry humans are dangerous." On Olympus Station, Dr. Lisa Grant and engineer Pete Harris worked frantically in the research bay. The sphere was pulsing faster now, once every 5 seconds. The energy readings were climbing steadily. "We have 2 options," Lisa said, her fingers flying over the control panel. "We can try to shut down the containment field, which might cause the exotic matter to explode. Or we can do nothing and let those things arrive. Neither option sounds good, Pete said. There's a third option, Lisa said slowly. What if we don't shut it down? What if we overload it instead? Pete stared at her. That would create an explosion that could destroy half this system. Or, Lisa continued, it could create a dimensional collapse. The ancient civilization used this sphere as a trap, right? They just weren't strong enough to make it work properly. But we have better technology now. Maybe we can finish what they started. Pete understood what she meant, and it was insane. You want to turn the sphere into a weapon. Use it to drag those things back to wherever they came from. Exactly. The calculations alone would take weeks. We have hours, Lisa grinned. Then we better start guessing. Humans are good at that. They began working on the most dangerous plan either of them had ever attempted. Dr. Alan Foster joined them, determined to help fix his mistake. Other scientists came too, both human and alien. Everyone knew the risk, but everyone also knew there was no choice. Meanwhile, the Frontier's Edge and every available human ship moved into position between the approaching entities and Olympus Station. Admiral Beth had called in every favor, contacted every ally, and even reached out to some enemies. Ships from a dozen different species joined the defensive line. But everyone knew the truth. They were massively outnumbered and outgunned. Jake Morrison stood on his bridge looking at the sensor displays with Chris and Nina. The entities were visible now on visual scanners. They were not ships or creatures in any normal sense. They looked like massive clouds of that same black substance they had found on Kepler Station, held together by gravity that should not exist. They eat space itself, Chris said, his voice full of wonder and horror. They consume matter, energy, even light. That's why the station was empty but undamaged. They don't destroy things. They absorb them completely. Then we need to be indigestible, Jake said. He opened a channel to the entire fleet, both human and alien ships. This is Captain Morrison. I will not lie to you. We woke these things up because we were too confident and too eager to prove ourselves. That mistake is on humanity. But here's what I know about my species. We are stubborn. We are creative. And we really, really hate losing. He paused, looking around his bridge at Nina and Chris and the rest of his crew. The plan is simple. We buy time for the scientists on Olympus to do something crazy. And if that does not work, we make these things regret waking up. Who is with me? Every single ship responded affirmatively. Even the alien vessels who had every right to run away stayed in formation. Some because they were brave, some because they knew running would not save them, and some because they had seen what humans did when they were desperate, and they wanted to be on humanity's side when that happened. The battle, when it began, was unlike anything in recorded history. The entities did not fight like normal enemies. They did not shoot weapons or use tactics. They simply moved forward, absorbing everything in their path. Energy weapons were useless. Missiles disappeared into the black clouds without exploding. Two ships that got too close were pulled apart slowly, their hulls peeling away like paper. Switch to kinetic weapons, Nina shouted from the tactical station. If they eat energy, feed them something solid instead. The fleet changed tactics immediately. Railguns fired metal slugs at incredible speeds. Mass drivers threw chunks of asteroid. The entities actually recoiled from the physical impacts. Solid matter moving fast enough disrupted their form somehow. Keep firing, Jake ordered. Aim for the same spots. Try to break them apart. For 2 hours, the fleet held the line. They lost ships. They lost good people. But they kept the entities away from Olympus Station, and that was what mattered. On the station, Pete and Lisa had assembled a team of 30 scientists and engineers. Their plan was taking shape, though calling it a plan was generous. It was more like organized chaos with math. We need to create a resonance cascade in the exotic matter, Lisa explained to the team. The sphere comes from another dimension. If we can force it to reconnect with that dimension, we can open a doorway. And then, someone asked, then we overload the sphere and turn the doorway into a trap. The dimensional backlash should pull those things through. Pete added, basically, we are building a bomb that explodes sideways into another universe. Everyone stared at him. It was the stupidest thing they had ever heard. I love it, said an alien scientist who looked like a floating jellyfish. Let us begin. They worked for 3 more hours while the battle raged outside. Ships exploded. People died, but the line held. Finally, Pete stood before the sphere with his hand on the activation switch. Everyone needs to evacuate. This close to the reaction, there is no guarantee anyone survives. Lisa stayed. Alan stayed. 8 other scientists and engineers refused to leave. They had helped cause this problem, and they would see it through to the end. If this fails, humanity is going to be the most hated species in the galaxy, Alan said. Then we better not fail, Lisa replied. Pete activated the sequence. The sphere began pulsing faster and faster. The exotic matter inside swirled in chaotic patterns. Energy readings went off every scale they had. The entities, sensing something wrong with their prison, rushed forward at terrible speed. They abandoned the battle and headed straight for the station. The dimensional bridge opened with a sound that hurt reality itself. Space tore open like fabric, revealing darkness beyond darkness. The pull was immense, stronger than any gravity well. The entities tried to stop, tried to retreat. But Pete had calculated everything perfectly. The pull was too strong. The first entity was dragged toward the opening, its form stretching and distorting. "It's working," Lisa shouted over the alarms. One by one, the 3 entities were pulled through the dimensional bridge, back to whatever nightmare place they came from. They fought and struggled, but the math was against them. As the last entity vanished, the bridge began to collapse. Pete and his team ran for the evacuation ships, but they all knew they would not make it in time. Then something unexpected happened. Ships from the fleet, vessels that should have been retreating to safety, flew directly at the collapsing bridge. They used their engines to create a gravity field that held the bridge open just a few seconds longer. It was enough. The evacuation ships cleared the station with seconds to. The aftermath was quiet in a way that felt wrong. Space around where Olympus Station used to be was filled with debris and rescue ships. The dimensional bridge was gone, the entities were gone, and the sphere had been destroyed in the collapse. But the cost had been high. 63 human ships were destroyed in the battle. Another 20 vessels from allied species were lost. Over 4,000 people died, both military and civilian. And it was all because humanity had misread a warning as a challenge. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his quarters on the frontier's edge, staring at the casualty reports. Each name represented someone who died because of his decision to take that sphere. The weight of it felt crushing. Nina Cole found him there an hour later. "Captain, the council wants to speak with you." Jake did not want to face the council. What could he say that would matter? But he was still a captain, and he had responsibilities. He stood up and followed Nina to the communication room. The council chamber appeared on the view screen. All 40 species representatives were present. The mood was difficult to read with so many different alien faces, but Jake could feel the tension. Ambassador Krell spoke first. His mandibles moved slowly, which in his species meant he was thinking carefully about his words. "Captain Morrison," Krell said, "your species turned a warning into a challenge, awakened ancient horrors, and nearly destroyed this entire sector of space." Jake nodded. There was nothing to deny. "Yes, Ambassador. We did. And then," Krell continued, "you convinced ships from multiple species to stand and fight against impossible odds. You bought time for scientists to build a weapon that should not work, based on calculations that were mostly guesses, and somehow you won." Jake was not sure where this was going. "We did what we had to do to fix our mistake." "That is what I find most interesting," Krell said. "Another species might have run. Another species might have blamed the Translator, or the ancient civilization for leaving confusing warnings, or simply accepted defeat. But humans took responsibility and fixed the problem, no matter how dangerous that was." Another ambassador spoke up, a being made of crystalline structures that rang like bells when it talked. "The question before us is what to do about humanity. Some want you banned from exploring ancient sites. Some want severe restrictions placed on human access to advanced technology." Admiral Beth Crawford appeared on another screen. She must have been listening. "And what do you want, Ambassador?" The crystal being was quiet for a moment, light refracting through its body. "I want humanity to help us catalog and protect other ancient sites. You made a terrible mistake, but you also solved a problem that an entire advanced civilization could not solve. Your way of thinking is dangerous, yes, but it is also valuable." Over the next week, the council debated endlessly. Some species were angry and wanted humans punished. Others were grateful and wanted humans rewarded. Eventually, they reached a compromise. Humanity would lead a new initiative to find and properly mark ancient warning sites across the galaxy. Human translators would work with alien linguists to create better translation protocols. and any ancient site discovered would require approval from multiple species before anyone could disturb it. Jake thought it was fair. More than fair, considering what had happened. Chris Baker spent 3 months working with xenolinguists from across the galaxy. They studied the ancient warnings and created a massive database of properly translated texts. What they found was disturbing. The entities they had fought were not the only danger out there. The ancient civilization had left warnings about other threats too. Things that ate planets, things that lived in stars, things that existed in dimensions humans could barely understand. But now the warnings were clear. Now everyone knew what to look for and what to avoid. Dr. Alan Foster retired from active research. He spent his remaining years teaching students about the importance of double-checking translations and never assuming you understand an ancient culture. His story became required study for every xenoarchaeologist in human space. Pete Harris and Lisa Grant got married 2 years later. They continued working on advanced containment technology, but they never tried to recreate the sphere. Some things were better left alone. Nina Cole took command of her own ship, leading security for the Ancient Site Protection Initiative. She was good at her job because she understood that sometimes the best way to prove yourself was knowing when not to take a challenge. As for the Frontier's Edge and its crew, they continued exploring space. But they approached ancient sites very differently now, carefully, respectfully, and with multiple translators checking everything 3 times before anyone touched anything. One day, 6 months after the battle, they discovered another ancient site. It had the same black stone obelisks and the same style of writing. But this time, Chris's translation was immediate and clear. Warning, danger, death. Turn back. Jake looked at the symbols and smiled. Well, that's straightforward enough. Mark the location, set up warning beacons, and let's move on. Some challenges are not worth taking. The crew agreed completely. Back on Earth, the story of the sphere and the battle became legend. Children learned about it in school. It was used as an example of both the dangers of overconfidence and the importance of fixing your mistakes. A new phrase entered human language. When someone was about to do something incredibly risky but necessary, people said they were pulling a Morrison. It was part warning and part compliment. The ancient civilization that had built the trap would never know that their sacrifice had finally worked. That another species had finished what they started, but they had left one more message that was discovered years later in a different part of space. The translation was clear this time. To those who come after us, we do not ask that you be perfect. We ask only that you try, that you learn from failure, and that you rise again when you fall. We failed to stop the darkness. Perhaps you will succeed where we could not. May your courage be tempered by wisdom. May your determination be guided by caution. May you survive your own mistakes and grow stronger from them. When Jake read that message, he felt something shift inside him. The weight he had been carrying since the battle got lighter. The ancient aliens had not been angry at them. They had understood. Mistakes happened. What mattered was what you did after. The universe was dangerous and full of things humans did not understand. Ancient warnings would sometimes fail. Translators would make mistakes. People would die. That was the reality of exploring space. But humans had proven something important. When they made a catastrophic error, they did not run away. They did not make excuses. They stood their ground and fought to make things right, even when the odds were impossible. Other species started to understand this about humanity. When a crisis happened, when something went terribly wrong, people started asking, where are the humans? Not because humans were the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced, but because humans were stubborn, because they would take responsibility for their mistakes, because they would try ridiculous plans that should not work but somehow did, because they would stand and fight when anyone sensible would run. Ambassador Krell visited Earth a year later. He met with Admiral Beth Crawford in her office overlooking the ocean. I have been thinking about your species, Krell said. You are young and reckless. You make terrible mistakes. You misread warnings as challenges and nearly destroyed a sector. That sounds about right, Beth agreed. But you are also brave and creative and absolutely refuse to quit. The galaxy needs that. Perhaps we older species have become too cautious. We see warnings and we run. We face challenges and we calculate the odds and decide it is not worth the risk. Krell looked out at the ocean, watching waves crash against the shore. Sometimes, Admiral, the universe needs someone who will look at impossible odds and say, "Hold my drink," before charging forward. Not often, but sometimes, Beth smiled. Just don't give us too many ancient artifacts to play with. We've learned our lesson, but we're still human. That is what I am counting on, Krell said. In the years that followed, humanity's role in the galactic community changed. They were no longer just the new species that everyone worried about. They became the species you called when normal solutions failed. When something required a crazy plan and the willingness to try it despite terrible odds. The universal translator that had failed so badly was completely rebuilt. The new version was better at handling ancient languages and unfamiliar grammar structures, but it also included a feature that Chris Baker insisted on. Every translation now came with a confidence rating. If the computer was not absolutely certain about a meaning, it said so. The sphere's technology was never fully replicated. Some things were better left as mysteries, but the lessons learned from studying it led to breakthroughs in energy containment and dimensional physics. The dimensional bridge technique that Pete and Lisa developed became a standard tool for dealing with extra-dimensional threats. Other scientists refined it, made it safer, and turned it into a reliable defensive technology. And somewhere in deep space, in a place that ancient warnings told people to avoid, there sat other sealed sites. Other traps, other dangers waiting for someone to be foolish enough to open them. But now those sites were properly marked. The warnings were properly